I didn't believe the old stories. Not really. But that all changed when I came face to face with something I still can't explain. It all started when I went to visit my aunt, who lived in a small village in the middle of nowhere. I hadn't seen her in years, so I was excited to spend some time with her. She was known in the village as a great cook, and people always said her food was the best you could get. Everyone loved her meals, and she had this way of making everything taste so good. The first night I was there, she made this huge meal for me. The smell was amazing. There was chicken, vegetables, some stew with meat, and a side of rice. She told me to sit and eat. "You must be hungry," she said with a smile. I sat down and started eating. Honestly, it was the best food I'd ever tasted. Every bite was better than the last. I felt my stomach fill up, and I started to relax, thinking about how nice it was to be back in the village. But then, something felt off. I can't explain it, but I felt this heaviness in my chest, like I couldn't breathe properly. I looked up at my aunt, but she was busy in the kitchen, humming to herself as she cleaned up. I shook it off, figuring maybe I was just tired from the long trip. That night, I slept in her guest room. I woke up in the middle of the night, sweating and restless. I couldn't figure out why, but I felt like something was watching me. I turned over in bed, but nothing was there. I went back to sleep, though the uneasy feeling stayed with me. The next day, I felt a bit strange. Not sick, but just not right. I felt tired and dizzy, like something was off in my body. I didn't want to worry my aunt, so I kept it to myself. She made me more food that day, more chicken and rice, and I ate it. Again, it tasted amazing, but I felt worse afterward. I decided to take a walk in the village to clear my head. As I passed by the old women sitting outside their homes, they stared at me with these cold eyes. One of them, Mama Olamide, called me over. She was a very old woman, bent with age and wisdom, and everyone in the village respected her. She asked me, "What did you eat last night?" I told her I had dinner at my aunt's house. "Oh, your aunt's cooking?" she asked with a strange smile. "You ate it, did you?" "Yes," I said, not sure where she was going with this. She leaned in close, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "If only you knew how she cooked it." I froze. Something about her words made my blood run cold. I wanted to laugh it off, but her expression was so serious. I couldn't. "What do you mean?" I asked. Mama Olamide looked around, as if making sure no one was listening, before she spoke again. "Your aunt is very skilled in cooking, but not in the way you think. She has ways you don't understand." I laughed nervously, trying to dismiss her words. "I'm sure it's just a village story, right?" Mama Olamide's face turned serious. "You think it's a story, but I've seen her many times. She doesn't use the regular things. You eat her food, and you don't ask questions. That's how it works." I wanted to ask more, but before I could, she just waved me off. "Be careful with her food. Once you start, you can't stop, and you don't want to know how it's made." That evening, I went back to my aunt's house. The food was already prepared. More chicken, more rice, more stew. I sat down, but this time I felt something was really wrong. The chicken looked perfect, golden brown, but something about it didn't sit right with me. I ate anyway, even though the taste didn't feel as good as before. I started feeling the same heaviness in my chest again. It was worse now. My heart was racing, and I felt dizzy. I put my spoon down and stood up, stumbling out of the house to get some air. But then, something strange happened. I saw something in the corner of the yard, something I hadn't noticed before. It was a small wooden shed, hidden behind some trees. I never saw it when I first arrived, but now I could see it clearly. A chill ran down my spine as I realized it wasn't just a shed. It was where she had been preparing the food. My curiosity got the best of me, and I walked toward the shed, despite my body telling me not to. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside. The smell was awful. It hit me like a punch to the stomach. The floor was covered in dirt and blood, and there were scraps of meat everywhere. In the corner, I saw something that made my blood freeze. A large cauldron bubbling with something dark. But what made me scream wasn't just the smell or the sight of the meat. It was the bones. Human bones. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There were bones in the cauldron, boiling along with the other meat. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest, and turned to run. but then I heard my aunt's voice behind me. "You shouldn't have come in here," she said softly. I turned around, terrified. She was standing in the doorway, a sad smile on her face. "I was hoping you wouldn't find out, but now, you know." I was too afraid to say anything. I couldn't move. She stepped closer, her eyes cold now. "This village depends on me," she whispered. "I feed them, and they keep their mouths shut. You can't tell anyone. Not after you've eaten." I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I felt like I was paralyzed, stuck in place. She came closer, and I could hear the sound of bones cracking under her feet as she walked. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice softer now, "but if only they knew how I cooked their food." I barely managed to break free and ran back to the house, heart racing, tears in my eyes. I couldn't even process what had just happened. I grabbed my things and left, not stopping to explain to anyone. I left the village, but I'll never forget what I saw that day. I never told anyone, and I don't think I ever will. But every time I see food now, I remember my aunt's smile and the look in her eyes. And I wonder, how many others are still eating her food? I couldn't shake the images from the shed out of my mind. Even when I left the village, I felt like something was still following me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the boiling cauldron, the bloodstains on the dirt floor, and the bones that weren't supposed to be there. I kept asking myself, why? Why did she do it? I tried to forget. I told myself I was just seeing things, that maybe I had eaten something that didn't agree with me, or maybe I was just imagining it all. But deep down, I knew what I saw. It wasn't a dream. It was real. The worst part was when I started thinking about the village. I wondered how many people had eaten her food, how many had lived their lives unaware of what they were really swallowing. The thought gnawed at me. Did they know, deep down, or were they too trusting to ask questions, like I was? One evening, about a month after I'd left, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was my cousin, who had stayed behind in the village. Her voice was shaky, almost frantic. "Have you heard?" she asked, barely able to speak. "It's happening. People are disappearing." "Disappearing?" I asked, heart pounding. "What do you mean?" She paused before answering. "People are vanishing from the village. No one knows where they are going. At first, it was just one or two, but now, it's more. And the food, everyone's still eating her food." I didn't need her to say more. I already knew what she was talking about. My stomach dropped. "Listen," I said, my voice tight. "You need to leave. Get out of there, now. Don't eat her food, whatever you do." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then she whispered, "I can't. She's already fed me." I didn't think it was a big deal, but now, I'm starting to feel sick. Something's wrong. I can feel it in my body. I feel heavy, like something's pulling me under. I wanted to tell her everything I knew, to warn her about the shed, the bones, and my aunt's dark secret, but I couldn't. She wouldn't believe me. She was too close to it, too deep into the village's culture to see it for what it was. "I have to go," she whispered, and then the line went dead. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake, my mind racing, picturing my cousin in that village. I kept hearing her voice, her words echoing in my head. "I've eaten it too. I feel heavy, something's pulling me." It wasn't just her. My aunt had done something to all of us, the whole village. She made us trust her, made us think that the food was normal, but it wasn't. I couldn't just sit here, knowing what was happening. The guilt was eating me alive. I should have done something sooner, but now it felt like it was too late. The next day, I booked a ticket back to the village. I had to go, even if it meant risking my life. I couldn't leave it like this. I had to stop whatever my aunt was doing, before anyone else disappeared. When I arrived back in the village, everything seemed quiet. Too quiet. The people seemed normal enough, but there was this strange tension in the air. I could feel it in my bones. I made my way to my aunt's house, trying to gather my courage. The village looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. The food stalls, the market, everything seemed shadowed, as if something was lurking beneath the surface. When I knocked on her door, she answered immediately, as if she had been expecting me. Her smile was the same, but there was something different about it now. It wasn't warm anymore. It was cold, calculating. I could almost hear her thoughts. like she knew exactly what was coming. You came back, she said, her voice smooth and pleasant. I thought you might. I tried to keep my voice steady. What are you doing, Aunt? People are disappearing. The village is changing. You've been feeding them. Those people. She didn't flinch. She just looked at me, like she was sizing me up. You know, don't you? She asked quietly. I know what you've been doing, and I'm not going to let you do it anymore. I'll expose you. I'll tell everyone the truth. Her eyes darkened, and for a moment, I saw something cold and dark flash across her face. Then, just as quickly, her smile returned. You still don't understand, do you? She said softly. This is how things work here. We feed them. We take care of them. They live, as long as they follow the rules. And those who refuse, well, they disappear, like all the others. I took a step back, my heart racing. What do you mean by take care of them? She walked past me, her steps slow and deliberate. You think the food is the only thing I give them? You think they're just eating chicken and rice? They're eating something much more important. I wanted to scream. How many more, Aunt? How many more have you? But she interrupted me, her voice sharp. Enough. You're going to eat this food. You're going to sit at the table and pretend like nothing's wrong. Or you're going to disappear, just like the others. I wanted to run. I wanted to get out of there, but my legs wouldn't move. It was like something was holding me in place, like I couldn't escape. She gestured to the table, where more food was waiting. Come. You're hungry. You're always hungry when you return. Eat, like you always do. The food sat there, staring at me. It looked like chicken and rice, just like before. But I knew better now. I knew the truth. I'm not eating it, I said, my voice shaking. My aunt's smile faltered for a second, but then she stepped forward and grabbed my arm with a strength I hadn't expected. You don't have a choice anymore. You've already eaten it. You've already become part of it. The room felt like it was closing in around me. I could feel the weight of her words, like they were sinking into me, like I was already too far gone. I had to leave, but I knew, deep down, I couldn't escape what I had already done. The food, it had changed me. It was too late. Maybe that's why I came back in the first place. To stop her, or maybe to understand. But now I know, no one is safe from the food, and now I can never forget what I saw in the shed. The village, my aunt, it's all connected. And once you've eaten it, you're a part of it too.